Have you ever wondered how much of what we call history is truly complete? How much of the story has reached us intact, untouched by the ambitions of kings, priests, and conquerors? Across centuries, entire civilizations have risen, flourished, and vanished into dust, leaving behind scattered fragments of memory in stone, parchment, and whispered legend. But between the lines of our surviving records, there are gaps, silences so profound that one cannot help but sense the weight of all we've lost. For every library built, countless more have been burned. For every text preserved, others were destroyed, deliberately erased because their words challenged the narratives of the powerful. And through it all, a quiet pattern emerges, a pattern of forgotten wisdom, lost knowledge, and secrets buried so deep they've become indistinguishable from myth, history. As we inherit it, is a tapestry woven not from the fullness of human experience, but from the remnants deemed acceptable to survive. The stories told in classrooms and written into textbooks are often the stories sanctioned by victors, polished and arranged to form a coherent, manageable account of the past. Yet the human story has never been neat. It is chaotic, contradictory, and inconvenient. And so we must ask ourselves, what truths have been lost to time, not by accident, but by design? What scrolls, manuscripts, and relics were hidden away or set to flame because their contents threatened to reshape the world as it was known? The deeper we look into history's shadows, the clearer it becomes that the past may not be as settled as we were taught to believe. Somewhere, perhaps, its most unsettling secrets still lie waiting. The desert has always held its own kind of silence, a silence so vast it feels ancient, stretching beyond memory and deeper than time itself. As dusk falls over the Judean hills, that silence grows heavier, pressing down on the rocky slopes and barren valleys, settling over the world like a forgotten shroud. The last threads of sunlight bleed across the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of crimson, amber, and fading violet. The air cools, the heat of the day retreating into the stones, leaving behind a dry, brittle stillness. In the distance, the shadows lengthen, turning jagged cliffs and lonely caves into yawning mouths of darkness. The occasional cry of a desert bird echoes and fades, and even the wind, once constant in its restless whisper, falls quiet. It's in moments like this, when the world seems to pause between breaths, that the land itself feels alive, as though it remembers things too old for men to speak aloud. For thousands of years, these hills have cradled secrets. Entire civilizations have passed through this unforgiving landscape, leaving behind little more than fragments, a broken shard of pottery here, a weathered inscription there, a sun-bleached bone half buried in sand. But somewhere beneath these rocky outcroppings, beneath layers of dust and time, lie things meant never to be found, things hidden by trembling hands in the dead of night. As armies approached, or as rulers declared forbidden knowledge to be purged, among these ancient stones, a few have always whispered of lost texts, scrolls, and records of such unsettling wisdom that their mere existence could threaten the foundations of power. Stories of messianic visions, of ancient kings erased from memory, of laws and prophecies too dangerous for the world to accept. And though most would dismiss such rumors as desert legends, the land remembers. Its caves, cold and silent, keep their counsel. As the last light surrenders to night, one cannot help but wonder what rests in the darkness, what lies beneath centuries of dust, waiting for a hand brave or foolish enough to disturb it. What if the stories we know, the sacred histories passed down for generations, are only fragments of a much larger, stranger truth? What if somewhere in the lost corners of this desert, beneath ancient stones and forgotten caves, there lie scrolls that tell of worlds we were never meant to remember, words penned by unknown hands, carrying messages too unsettling for the rulers of their time? What if there were writings that spoke of prophets whose names were deliberately erased, teachings that diverged from the sanctioned creeds, or accounts of ancient events that would unravel the delicate order of accepted history? What if these texts contained visions of alternate beginnings, revelations about humankind's origins, or forgotten laws meant to reshape not just belief, but the structure of society itself? And what if, in moments of upheaval, as empires fell and new faiths took hold, those entrusted with these fragile scrolls faced a choice: to destroy them and consign their knowledge to oblivion, or to hide them in the earth, waiting for a time when the world might be ready to hear what was once forbidden? Could it be that we walk atop a landscape littered with lost wisdom, the remnants of ancient truths sealed away by those who feared their power? Could it be that the past we think we understand is only the past we've been allowed to know? These are the questions that linger in the cool desert air as night falls, unanswered, unresolved, and perhaps deliberately so. In the spring of 1947, under the indifferent gaze of an ancient sun, a Bedouin boy named Mohammed Dib wandered through the rocky wilderness near the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea. He was not a scholar, nor a treasure hunter. He sought no relics, no ancient wisdom. All he wanted was to find a goat, a single, wayward animal that had strayed from the rest of the herd and vanished into the jagged landscape. The desert was a place where time seemed suspended, where centuries folded over one another like the wind-swept layers of dust along its stone-strewn paths. It was a land of caves and cliffs, bleached bones and forgotten trails, where the old and the new coexisted in uneasy silence. For a shepherd boy of 15, it was a familiar yet indifferent world, one that offered little more than the promise of blistering heat by day, biting cold by night, and the occasional peril of hidden vipers or crumbling rocks as he moved from one limestone outcropping to the next. Mohammed called out into the emptiness, his voice thin against the dry air. Somewhere the goat was out there, or so he hoped. The slopes were dotted with gnarled shrubs and narrow gullies, each shadowed corner a potential refuge for the animal. His eyes, trained by necessity to catch the smallest movement against the endless monochrome, scanned the terrain, and then a dark mouth in the stone, a small opening in the rock face, just wide enough for a boy to slip through. Caves were not uncommon in these hills, carved by wind, water, and time into the soft limestone. Some had served as shelters for travelers, others as hiding places for thieves or rebels in centuries past. Most were empty, little more than hollowed tombs for forgotten memories. Curiosity tugged at him. Perhaps the goat had taken refuge inside. Picking up a small stone, Mohammed hurled it through the opening, listening for the startled bleat of an animal, or perhaps the clatter of hooves against stone. Instead, a dull, unexpected sound reached his ears, the hollow, brittle shatter of something breaking. It was not the noise of rock striking rock, but of clay splitting apart after centuries of sleep. Intrigued and a little cautious, the boy ducked inside. The cave was narrow and cool, its floor layered with dust, undisturbed. For uncounted years, the faint light from the entrance cast weak, trembling shapes along the uneven walls. Against one side of the chamber, a cluster of tall, clay jars stood in the half-darkness, their surfaces caked with ancient grime, their lids sealed tight with hardened pitch. Several of the jars had already broken, their contents spilling out in small piles of brittle parchment and tattered cloth. The air inside the cave was dry, so dry, in fact, that whatever lay inside the jars had not disintegrated entirely, but remained, remarkably, in recognizable form. It is difficult to say what thoughts crossed the shepherd boy's mind in that moment. Did he sense the age of what lay before him? Did the weight of the centuries press upon his shoulders as he reached out to touch the remnants of a world lost to time? Or was it, to him, no more than a strange and puzzling find in a lonely, desert cave? Whatever his thoughts, the boy gathered a handful of the scrolls and carried them back to his tent. The next day he showed them to his cousin and a few other men from his tribe. None of them could read the faded ink, nor did they immediately grasp the magnitude of their discovery. In their world, ancient things were neither rare nor always valuable. They were objects of curiosity, sometimes of worth, but more often of forgotten meaning. And so the scrolls passed from hand to hand, traded in dusty marketplaces, sold for a handful of coins. No one yet knew that those brittle scraps of parchment, those faded lines of Hebrew and Aramaic script, contained secrets that would echo across continents, spark decades of controversy, and reopen the darkest corners of religious history. It had begun with a lost goat, but what lay in the darkness of that cave would prove far more elusive. The landscape surrounding the Dead Sea is a stark masterpiece of contrasts where earth and sky meet in a vast expanse of rugged hills, jagged cliffs, and barren plateaus. The Judean desert stretches endlessly, its dusty, ochre, and sun-bleached stones interrupted only by the shimmering waters of the Dead Sea, the lowest point on earth, lying nearly 1,300 feet below sea level. This harsh environment, unforgiving to life, has long served as a refuge place to hide secrets away from the eyes of the world. Amidst this rugged wilderness are a series of caves etched into the limestone cliffs, their entrances yawning like the mouths of ancient beasts. These caves, carved slowly over millennia by wind, rain, and the relentless forces of nature, vary in size and depth. Some extend deep into the rock, descending into shadowed hollows filled with dust and forgotten memories. Others are narrow, crevices barely wide enough for a single person to squeeze through. It was within one such cave near Qumran, perched above the northwest shore of the Dead Sea, that the scrolls had been concealed. This particular cave was unassuming, a jagged notch in the cliffside, partially hidden by scrub and loose stones. Its interior cloaked in near-complete darkness, save for a faint sliver of light from its narrow entrance. The air inside was dry and stale, the kind of dryness that preserves rather than destroys, allowing fragile organic materials to endure far beyond their expected lifespan. Inside, tall clay jars stood silently, lined up against the cave wall, as if awaiting a return that would never come. These vessels were crafted with a deliberate care, their broad shoulders tapering gracefully down to sturdy bases. Made from coarse, reddish-brown clay, each jar bore the fingerprints of ancient artisans, their surfaces rough but robust, sealed tightly with lids smeared in hardened pitch to ward off moisture and pests. The jars were the guardians of the scrolls, delicate bundles of parchment and papyrus painstakingly preserved within their earthen wombs. Wrapped in linen cloth and tied with strips of leather, these scrolls were carefully protected from the elements, a silent testament to the reverence with which their contents were regarded as centuries passed. Dust settled on the jars, and the shifting earth gradually concealed their hiding place. The desert's relentless heat and dryness worked in tandem to preserve the fragile manuscripts inside, preventing the decay that usually consumes organic materials over time. The environment was paradoxical, hostile to life, yet merciful to memory. The scrolls themselves were composed of animal skins, primarily parchment, made from treated goat or sheep, hides meticulously prepared to receive the inscriptions. Some were long rolls, others shorter fragments, all bearing the faded imprints of ink that had resisted the erosive power of time. The writing, inscribed in ancient Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, told stories, laws, prophecies, and hymns, each character a link to a vanished world. Upon unrolling, the scrolls revealed layers of layered history. Some contained copies of texts found in the Hebrew Bible, making them the oldest known manuscripts of these sacred writings. Others held lesser-known sectarian writings, reflecting the beliefs and rules of the community that had hidden them. Perhaps the Essenes, a Jewish sect known to dwell in the area. The very texture of the scrolls whispered their age. Edges worn and frayed, ink faded yet stubbornly persistent. The parchments were fragile, almost translucent under the light. The craftsmanship was meticulous, the seams sewn with fine thread, the text aligned with precise calligraphy, the layout reflecting a careful tradition. Some scrolls were wrapped tightly, protected from the outside world, while others had partially unraveled, revealing their delicate contents to the cave's stale air. The scattered remains told a tale of hurried concealment, jars broken, scrolls spilled, as if their guardians fled in haste, leaving behind both treasures and mysteries. In the dusty corners of the cave, shards of pottery and small stone tools lay scattered, a silent archaeological footprint of a people who had chosen this desolate place for reasons known only to them. The very silence of the cave seemed to echo the weight of secrets it held, suspended in time and waiting for a chance to speak again. This setting was more than a mere hiding place. It was a sanctuary, both physical and spiritual, crafted to protect knowledge so precious that generations would risk everything to conceal it. And when those ancient vessels were disturbed by the careless hand of a shepherd boy searching for a lost goat, the fragile veil between past and present began to lift, ushering in an era of revelation, mystery, and endless questions. News of the scroll's discovery traveled slowly at first, carried by whispers and cautious conversations in the dusty towns surrounding the Dead Sea. When the ancient manuscripts finally reached the hands of scholars, their significance was not immediately understood. The fragile parchments, inscribed in faded Hebrew and Aramaic, presented a puzzle wrapped in riddles, both in their physical fragility and in the profound questions they posed. The initial scholarly reaction was one of awe mixed with confusion. These scrolls were unlike anything seen before. For decades, biblical scholars had relied on manuscripts no older than 1,000 years. Now, here were texts that seemed to date back to millennia or more, potentially reshaping understandings of religious history, scriptural authenticity, and the cultural landscape of the Second Temple period. Experts from across the world rushed to examine the scrolls. Teams were assembled in Jerusalem and beyond to carefully unroll and conserve the brittle fragments. Each discovery became a revelation. Some scrolls containing parts of the Hebrew Bible, others bearing sectarian writings never before encountered. The famed Isaiah scroll, remarkably intact, offered a near-complete version of one of the oldest biblical texts, stirring excitement and debate. Yet, with the excitement came profound mystery. Who had hidden these scrolls? Why had they been concealed in such remote, inaccessible caves? What secret knowledge might they contain that had compelled such secrecy? Speculation spread quickly, and some scholars proposed connections to the Essenes, a Jewish sect described by ancient historians as living in isolation near the Dead Sea. Known for their strict adherence to purity and apocalyptic beliefs, beyond the textual content, questions emerged about the scrolls' provenance and the silence that had enveloped them for centuries. What had happened to the people who once cherished these writings? Had they been destroyed, exiled, or simply vanished into history? The scrolls seemed to open a window onto a world lost one, both familiar and alien, revealing facets of ancient life that had remained hidden beneath layers of dust and time. The arrival of the scrolls ignited intense scholarly debate and controversy. Some feared the implications. Would these texts challenge established religious doctrines? Would they unsettle the foundations of faith and history carefully maintained over millennia? Others worried about the political implications as the scrolls emerged amid the turbulent birth of the modern state of Israel. Their discovery entwined with questions of identity, heritage, and ownership. In the months and years that followed, the Dead Sea Scrolls became a focal point not only for biblical scholarship but for archaeology, theology, and history. They challenged long-held assumptions and invited new interpretations, their silent script beckoning the world to look again at the origins of religion, culture, and knowledge itself. And yet, even as fragments of ancient wisdom were painstakingly pieced together, a deeper mystery remained. What other secrets did the desert caves still guard? What truths had been deliberately hidden, and what fragments were yet to emerge from the shadows of forgotten time? The very act of hiding something as precious as the Dead Sea Scrolls speaks volumes. These manuscripts were not casually misplaced or forgotten. They were deliberately concealed, carefully wrapped, sealed in jars, and tucked away in remote caves to keep their contents from prying eyes. But why? What threat could fragile scrolls pose that compelled their guardians to such secrecy? To understand this, we must look at the turbulent world in which these texts were created. The late Second Temple period, spanning roughly from 500 BCE to 70 CE, was an era of political upheaval, religious ferment, and competing ideologies. Judea was a land caught between empires, the rising power of Rome pressing hard against local authorities, while internal factions jostled for control and legitimacy. In this charged environment, the scrolls likely represented more than mere religious writings. They were documents of power-carrying theological claims, legal codes, and prophetic visions that challenged dominant authorities. For some, these texts may have been dangerous heresies, capable of undermining established religious structures or even threatening the political status quo. Many scholars associate the scrolls with the Essenes, a sect that rejected the corrupt priesthood of Jerusalem and anticipated an imminent, divine intervention, messianic kingdom that would overturn existing powers. Their writings often reflect apocalyptic themes, strict purity laws, and a worldview at odds with the mainstream religious institutions. To rulers and priests, such dissenting voices were not simply theological debates. They were challenges to control. The scrolls' hidden content could have revealed alternative versions of sacred history, prophecies that questioned the legitimacy of reigning authorities, or laws that contradicted official doctrine. Such revelations threatened not only religious orthodoxy but also the fragile peace maintained by political alliances. Hiding these texts was therefore an act of preservation, but also an act of defiance. It was a refusal to allow their knowledge to be destroyed or co-opted. The scrolls' caretakers may have anticipated the Roman destruction of the temple in 70 CE and sought to protect their heritage from obliteration, but they also sought to keep their message alive, preserving a narrative suppressed by both political and religious powers. Moreover, accusations of heresy were a powerful tool in ancient times. Labeling a belief or text as heretical justified persecution and censorship. The guardians of the scrolls might have feared that their writings would be branded as blasphemous or dangerous, leading to the destruction of their community and teachings. In this light, the concealment of the scrolls becomes a profound testament to the clash between competing visions of truth. It reminds us that history is not just a neutral record of facts, but a battlefield where ideas vie for survival and where knowledge itself can be both weapon and refuge. The Dead Sea Scrolls do more than simply recount laws and religious rituals. Embedded within their fragile pages lie cryptic prophecies and narratives that hint at alternative visions of history and destiny, visions that diverged sharply from the dominant narratives later enshrined in religious texts and traditions. It is here that speculation flourishes, for these scrolls seem to whisper of a world that might have been, a world where the future itself was contested, and where competing messiahs awaited their moment. One of the most tantalizing aspects of the scrolls is their messianic expectation, a fervent hope and belief in the arrival of an anointed one, or even multiple anointed figures who would restore divine order and justice. Unlike the singular Messiah of later Christian theology, the scrolls reveal a more complex and fragmented landscape of messianic hopes. Some texts speak of a priestly Messiah, a leader of the sacred order responsible for restoring the temple and religious purity. Others refer to a kingly Messiah, a warrior figure destined to overthrow foreign oppressors and establish a righteous kingdom on earth. This dual, or even multiple Messiah, concept challenges simplified narratives. It suggests that ancient Judaism was not monolithic, but vibrant, contested, and diverse. Different groups envisioned the Messiah differently, some spiritual, some political. This plurality in messianic expectation may have contributed to the scrolls' concealment, as dominant powers sought to suppress dissenting beliefs that threatened their control. The scrolls also contain apocalyptic writings, visions of cataclysmic upheavals, divine judgment, and a final reckoning that would reshape the cosmos. These texts reveal a community grappling with oppression and uncertainty, interpreting their hardships as part of a cosmic battle between forces of light and darkness. Such apocalyptic worldviews would deeply influence early Christian thought, but were viewed with suspicion and hostility by established authorities. Beyond messianic hopes, the scrolls hint at alternate histories, accounts of events and genealogies that deviate from canonical scriptures. Some scholars speculate that these texts preserve traditions and oral histories suppressed or erased by later editors and religious institutions. Could the scrolls hold clues to lost knowledge about ancient civilizations, forbidden wisdom about creation, or even accounts of early human origins that challenge orthodox teachings? One fragment, known as the War Scroll, describes an epic final battle between the sons of light and the sons of darkness, a conflict that transcends earthly politics and enters the realm of mythic destiny. Such texts blur the line between history and prophecy, narrative and ideology, forcing readers to question where truth ends and belief begins. Other scrolls contain interpretations of the Torah that differ markedly from later rabbinic traditions. They reveal a community seeking to live by a strict and unique interpretation of the law, one that rejected compromises and sought total purity. This exclusivity may have rendered them outsiders, heretics in the eyes of the dominant priesthood, deepening the impulse to hide their writings. Speculative theories also abound regarding the scrolls' authorship and purpose. Were they the product of a secluded sect, such as the Essenes, or did they represent a broader coalition of groups? Did their concealment stem from fear of Roman reprisals or internal Jewish conflicts? Some suggest the scrolls were deliberately hidden to preserve a sacred legacy, a spiritual resistance to cultural assimilation and political domination. Furthermore, modern fringe theories have posited even more radical ideas that the scrolls contain secret knowledge about extraterrestrial origins, lost technologies, or suppressed scientific truths. While lacking credible evidence, such theories underscore the enduring allure of the scrolls as a gateway to hidden worlds. The mystery deepens when considering what else might have been lost. If these scrolls represent only a fraction of what once existed, what other texts, perhaps far more explosive or heretical, were destroyed or remain buried beneath the desert sands? Each fragment recovered invites new questions, suggesting that history, as recorded, is a partial story shaped by those who held power in this light. The Dead Sea Scrolls serve as a reminder of the fluidity of history and belief. They challenge us to consider that our accepted narratives may be only one version among many, that the past is a contested terrain where memory, faith, and politics collide. The scrolls beckon us to peer beyond the official story and confront the shadows of forgotten possibilities. Imagine, for a moment, the moment these scrolls were hidden was instead the moment they were revealed and veiled openly to the world in the 1st century CE. What might have been the consequences? How would the ancient world have reacted to these secret texts that challenged official histories, questioned religious authorities, and offered radically different visions of the future? Had these manuscripts emerged during their own time, the political and religious landscape of Judea and the broader Mediterranean could have been transformed irrevocably. The scrolls' alternate messianic prophecies alone threatened established power. The notion of multiple messiahs, priestly and kingly, spiritual and militant, could have fractured unity among Jewish communities and intensified sectarian conflict. The competing claims to divine authority, if widely accepted, might have weakened the authority of the temple priesthood and Roman-appointed rulers alike. Religious leaders, fiercely protective of orthodoxy, would likely have responded with swift and severe suppression. The scrolls, apocalyptic visions, and sectarian laws challenged the very foundations of existing beliefs. Exposing such texts to the public might have been perceived as heresy, igniting purges, book burnings, and widespread persecution. The guardians of the scrolls may have recognized this danger and chosen concealment over confrontation, desperate bid to protect both the knowledge and their own community. On a broader scale, the scrolls contained not only religious law and prophecy, but reflections on identity, purity, and divine justice that critiqued social and political corruption. Revealing these critiques could have galvanized resistance against Roman occupation and local collaborators, potentially accelerating unrest or rebellion. Yet such exposure also risked devastating crackdowns and bloodshed. The scrolls' revelations might also have complicated early Christian origins. Emerging around the same time, Christianity drew upon Jewish messianic hopes and scriptures. The scrolls varied. Messianic expectations and alternate scriptural interpretations could have rivaled or even contradicted nascent Christian doctrine, influencing theological debates and political alliances in profound ways. Moreover, the scrolls included practical knowledge laws on ritual purity, community organization, and daily life that proposed a rigorous, exclusionary lifestyle. Their public disclosure might have sparked social division, compelling communities to choose sides between traditional temple practices and the more radical, purist vision encoded in these writings. Imagine the upheaval if these sacred texts revealed that what had been accepted as history was incomplete or even deliberately altered. Trust in established institutions, both religious and political, could have eroded rapidly. The scrolls would have exposed the fragility of official narratives and the existence of suppressed voices. This destabilization might have reshaped the trajectory of Western religious and cultural history. Yet, had the scrolls remained hidden, they preserved the very possibility of rediscovery centuries later, allowing the modern world to grapple with their mysteries on new terms. In their concealment lay both a tragedy and a safeguard, the loss of immediate knowledge, but the protection of an ancient legacy. In contemplating what might have been lost or gained, we are reminded that history is never merely about facts, but about power. The power to shape belief, memory, and identity. The scrolls, hidden in caves for millennia, are a testament to the lengths people go to protect what they hold sacred, and the enduring tension between revelation and concealment. When the first Dead Sea Scrolls surfaced in the late 1940s, they were swiftly recognized as one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. Yet, ironically, they soon vanished from public view, not back into desert caves, but into the guarded hands of a small, insular circle of scholars. This group would hold a near-absolute monopoly over the scrolls for more than 4 decades, shaping not only who could read them, but what the world was allowed to know about them. At first, the discovery's scale and potential meaning overwhelmed the academic and religious establishments. A few fragile parchment fragments, written in ancient Hebrew and Aramaic, might be intriguing, but when it became clear that hundreds of manuscripts had been unearthed and that their contents touched on biblical texts, messianic expectations, and apocalyptic visions long lost to history, the stakes became far higher. The scrolls weren't merely relics of a forgotten sect. They posed questions about the very roots of Judaism and Christianity. In response, a small group of scholars, many closely tied to religious and state institutions, swiftly positioned themselves as the official custodians of the scrolls. Operating primarily out of the Rockefeller Museum in East Jerusalem, they were given exclusive access to the materials. Their stated mission was to meticulously photograph, piece together, translate, and publish the scrolls for posterity. But what was promised as careful stewardship soon turned into something else, a tightly controlled academic fiefdom. This core group, known informally as the Scrolls Team, was led by figures like Roland de Vaux, a French Dominican priest, an archaeologist, and John Strugnow, a brilliant but volatile scholar who would later become the chief editor of the scrolls. Alongside them was a coterie of European and American academics, forming what came to be known as the International Team. This small fraternity viewed themselves not merely as scholars, but as guardians of a volatile and potentially dangerous treasure. Their control was absolute. No one outside this inner circle could view the actual fragments. Access was restricted, inquiries were ignored, and dissenters ostracized. Requests by younger scholars or rival institutions were routinely denied. Even Israeli authorities, following the 1967 Six-Day War, when Israel took control of East Jerusalem and the Rockefeller Museum, largely deferred to this entrenched academic class. This monopolization had far-reaching consequences for decades. The scrolls remained unpublished and inaccessible to the wider scholarly community. Only carefully curated portions were released, often accompanied by lengthy commentaries that reflected the biases and assumptions of the team. Questions about alternative readings, controversial content, or politically sensitive material were deferred or buried entirely. The reasons for this control were complex. On one level, it was about academic prestige. The chance to be the first to translate and interpret such ancient, consequential texts was an unparalleled career opportunity. But it was also about protecting religious orthodoxy and political interests. The scrolls touched upon themes of contested messianic traditions, sectarian conflict, and apocalyptic theology, elements that could disrupt modern understandings of Jewish and Christian origins. Moreover, many of the early scholars were themselves members of religious orders or institutions with vested interests in how the scroll's contents were framed. They understood, perhaps better than anyone, the potential of these ancient texts to stir controversy if their more provocative passages were made public without careful mediation. Over time, this insular group became increasingly defensive, deflecting criticism and dismissing demands for transparency. As years turned into decades, frustrations grew within the broader academic world. Scholars lamented the fact that a treasure of human history remained locked away, not by time or desert sands, but by bureaucratic decisions and professional jealousies. The international academic community began to murmur about the scroll's fate. Rumors circulated of texts describing rival messianic figures, sectarian uprisings, and alternate versions of biblical books. Some speculated about passages that might radically revise Christian theological claims or Jewish religious traditions. The mystery of what was being hidden became as tantalizing as the content itself. It wasn't until the final decades of the 20th century that pressure mounted to an unbearable degree. Independent scholars, journalists, and even governments began calling for the scrolls to be released, not just as relics, but as vital records belonging to the heritage of all humanity. The battle for the Dead Sea Scrolls was no longer a quiet academic feud. It had become a public controversy, and in the shadows of that controversy, the question lingered: how much of history had been delayed, reshaped, or lost entirely because a handful of men decided that the world wasn't yet ready to know its own past? Behind the veil of academic monopoly over the Dead Sea Scrolls, subtler and far more enduring forces lurked in the background. It was not only about scholarly prestige or personal ambition. The scrolls had the potential to challenge long-established religious narratives and national myths, and so powerful religious and political institutions took a vested interest in how and if their contents would be revealed. From the moment the scroll's significance was grasped, religious authorities, both in Christianity and Judaism, recognized the stakes. These weren't merely archaeological curiosities. They were ancient religious documents containing alternate interpretations of scripture, eschatology, and law. Some texts bore striking parallels to early Christian beliefs, while others deviated radically from both mainstream Jewish and Christian orthodoxy. In them lay the potential to complicate or contradict long-held doctrines. For the Catholic Church, already grappling with modern biblical criticism and growing secularism in the mid-20th century, the scrolls posed a threat to the narrative of linear, divinely guided religious history. If these ancient writings spoke of messianic figures and apocalyptic wars outside the bounds of established scripture, or suggested competing theological visions alive within Second Temple Judaism, it could unsettle the Church's claim of spiritual continuity and supremacy. Likewise, the various branches of Judaism, especially in the nascent state of Israel, saw the scrolls as both a treasure and a liability. They offered a rare first-hand glimpse into the religious thought of a pivotal era in Jewish history. But some of those ideas, particularly those belonging to sectarian groups like the Essenes, stood in stark opposition to later rabbinic tradition. Exposing these ancient conflicts could disrupt modern understandings of Jewish identity and authority. Complicating matters further was the geopolitical context. The discovery of the scrolls coincided with the creation of the modern state of Israel in 1948 and the geopolitical upheaval that followed. The scrolls' location in East Jerusalem, under Jordanian control at the time, made them a symbol of national and religious heritage contested by both Israelis and Arabs. To the Jordanians, control over the scrolls was a way to assert cultural dominance and bolster their claim over Jerusalem's holy sites. As a result, the Rockefeller Museum, where most of the scrolls were housed, became a quiet battleground for influence. The Jordanian government maintained strict oversight of access to the scrolls, while Catholic scholars, particularly those from the École Biblique, ensured that the Vatican maintained an invisible but influential hand in their management. Neither was eager to see the scrolls fall into Israeli or secular academic hands, where more provocative interpretations might surface. The political nature of this control was never formally acknowledged, but it shaped every decision about the scrolls' release. Selections for publication were carefully curated to avoid material that might suggest alternate messianic claimants, challenge biblical inerrancy, or reveal apocalyptic beliefs that echoed disturbingly with Christian end-times theology. This discretion was not limited to ancient theological concerns. Modern governments, too, understood the power of historical narratives. The emergence of early Christian-like sectarian groups with messianic hopes in ancient Judea could lend credence to politically charged claims about historical continuity, territorial rights, and religious legitimacy in Jerusalem. In a region where ancient history is inseparable from modern politics, who told the story of the past and how could subtly shape the future, even within Israel? After the 1967 war and the capture of East Jerusalem, the government was cautious. While eager to reclaim Jewish heritage, authorities were aware of the religious sensitivities and the risk of exacerbating tensions with Christian institutions and neighboring Arab states. Thus, the Dead Sea Scrolls became not just a scholarly matter, but a diplomatic and religious one. Behind the polite language of academic conferences and the yellowed pages of scholarly journals lay a struggle for narrative dominance. Religious leaders, political operatives, and state authorities understood that history is one of the most powerful tools in the shaping of collective identity, and the scrolls threatened to alter that history in ways too unpredictable to allow open, unregulated disclosure. In this silent, shadowed contest, it wasn't only what the scrolls revealed that mattered, but who controlled the telling. For decades, the world beyond the scrolls' guarded vaults remained in quiet frustration, barely aware of what was being withheld. Occasional whispers drifted through the scholarly community, fragments of letters, mentions of controversial messianic texts, hints of prophecies never canonized. A small circle of insiders continued to preside over these ancient relics like medieval scribes safeguarding the fate of nations. But history, like water, resists containment. And in time, the world began to demand answers. The first murmurs of discontent emerged in academic circles. Younger scholars, excluded from the international team's closed ranks, questioned the prolonged delays and the secrecy surrounding the scrolls. Years turned to decades, and still, the promised full publication remained elusive. Skepticism grew. How could a discovery of such monumental importance be so carefully managed by so few? What were they protecting, and from whom? By the 1980s, the discontent had escalated to public controversy. Journalists began probing the story. Articles appeared in newspapers and magazines, highlighting the monopoly of access and speculating about what might be deliberately concealed. The image of the scrolls shifted in the public imagination from ancient religious texts in the hands of careful academics to artifacts caught in a tangled web of religious politics, careerism, and historical gatekeeping. The turning point came not from the insiders, but from bold acts of defiance. In 1991, a scholar named Herschel Shanks, editor of the Biblical Archaeology Review, published a scathing editorial condemning the decades-long academic strike. He accused the team of hoarding history, of denying both the academic community and the public their rightful heritage. Shanks' outcry galvanized global attention. Around the same time, a major rupture occurred within the establishment itself. A disgruntled member of the Scrolls editorial team secretly provided photographs of the unpublished texts to outsiders. These images eventually reached the Huntington Library in California, where its director made the extraordinary decision to grant open access to scholars worldwide. It was an unprecedented breach of the long-standing academic embargo. The reaction was immediate and volatile. Traditional gatekeepers condemned the move as reckless and unprofessional. Some accused the dissenters of undermining scholarly integrity, but to much of the academic world and the public, it was a long overdue act of intellectual liberation. For the first time in over 40 years, the Dead Sea Scrolls would no longer be the exclusive property of a privileged few in the years that followed. Under mounting pressure, the Israel Antiquities Authority and various academic institutions began to release facsimiles and digital archives of the scrolls. New translations and interpretations surfaced, challenging earlier assumptions and inviting a broader range of voices into the conversation. Some of the most controversial passages, those hinting at multiple messianic figures, radical apocalyptic expectations, and alternative scriptural traditions, were finally revealed. The battle was far from clean, and many mysteries remained. Portions of texts were still fragmentary, with some fragments having vanished during the decades of secrecy. Disputes over provenance, interpretation, and authenticity continued, but the age of enforced silence had ended. The scrolls, long buried in both sand and bureaucracy, were returning to the world. The public outcry wasn't merely about the contents of the Dead Sea Scrolls. It was a reckoning with the broader truth that history, too often, is a carefully managed story, shaped by those with the power to withhold, delay, and curate knowledge. And for many, the fight to free the scrolls became a symbol of a deeper human struggle, the right to confront our own past, unmediated and unfiltered, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. In the long history of human civilization, knowledge has always been a force both revered and feared. It is no accident that the guardians of sacred texts, ancient archives, and forbidden manuscripts have so often been those in positions of power. Religious leaders, monarchs, scholars, and governments alike. The story of the Dead Sea Scrolls, though rooted in a desolate desert cave, is but one chapter in a larger, older tale, the quiet, calculated control of memory itself, for knowledge is more than information. It shapes identities, justifies authority, and defines the boundaries of what a people, a faith, or a nation believes to be true. In the hands of the few, it becomes a tool, sharpened not only to preserve heritage, but to dictate how that heritage may be understood. Those who possess exclusive access to ancient writings do not merely guard the past, they shape the future. The decades-long monopoly over the Dead Sea Scrolls was not an aberration. It mirrored countless moments in history where those entrusted with knowledge chose to delay, withhold, or selectively reveal truths, fearing the disruption they might cause. From medieval monasteries to imperial archives, from colonial museums to secret state records, the pattern repeats. The gatekeepers insist they act in the name of careful stewardship. But behind those locked doors, decisions are made about what the world is and isn't allowed to know. And so, the question arises: how much of what we call history is not a faithful recounting, but a curated narrative? How many truths were quietly set aside, not because they were lost to time, but because they threatened the comfort of the prevailing order? The saga of the Dead Sea Scrolls reminds us that history is not simply what survives the centuries. It is what is permitted to survive, and what is allowed to be spoken. The struggle to free these ancient texts from academic and institutional custody was about more than parchment and ink. It was about reclaiming the right to confront our own past, with all its contradictions, upheavals, and forgotten possibilities. A battle not just for scrolls, but for memory itself. Few names evoke as much sorrow and wonder in the annals of lost knowledge as the Library of Alexandria. It was not merely a repository of scrolls and manuscripts. It was a symbol, a living testament to the boundless curiosity of the ancient world. Its destruction has haunted historians and philosophers for centuries, not only because of what was lost, but because of what might have been. Founded in the early 3rd century BCE, during the reign of Ptolemy I Soter, the Library of Alexandria was intended as a sanctuary for all human knowledge. The Ptolemy successors to Alexander the Great sought to gather the writings of every known civilization: Greek, Egyptian, Persian, Indian, Babylonian, Phoenician, and beyond. Merchant ships docking in Alexandria's bustling harbor were routinely searched, their scrolls confiscated and copied. Originals were kept, duplicates returned. In time, it's believed the library amassed hundreds of thousands of texts. Within its walls were works we now know only by name or scattered fragments. Histories of vanished kingdoms, treatises on medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy. Tales of myth and theology from lands whose borders have long since shifted or vanished. Scholars from every corner of the ancient world converged upon Alexandria to study, debate, and preserve the wisdom of ages past. But like so many monuments to human knowledge, the library's fate was bound to the ambitions and fears of empires. It suffered through multiple assaults, fires, and political purges. The most famous, though historically disputed, was said to have occurred under Julius Caesar's siege of Alexandria in 48 BCE, later centuries. Brought further devastations from Christian zealots during the rise of orthodoxy, who deemed pagan texts heretical, to Muslim conquerors, who allegedly judged its contents redundant in light of the Quran. What was lost in those flames was not simply parchment and ink, but possibilities. medical texts that may have contained cures forgotten to time, maps that might have redrawn our understanding of ancient travel and discovery, philosophical systems that could have reshaped the course of ethical thought, myths and creation stories, from cultures whose voices were extinguished, and with each fire, each order of destruction, the narrative of human history was rewritten, not by what remained, but by what was removed. The victors of history did not merely conquer with armies, they conquered memory. The Library of Alexandria stands as the first great monument to this pattern, a tragic reminder that the loss of knowledge is rarely an accident of war alone. More often, it is a deliberate act carried out under the guise of righteousness, security, or religious purity. The silence left behind is perhaps the greatest tragedy of all. What questions might have been answered? What lost wisdom could have steered civilization down different, less destructive paths? We can only speculate, and in that speculation, we are left to confront the unsettling truth. History is as much about what was destroyed as it is about what survived. As the Roman Empire shifted from a realm of pagan gods to a dominion increasingly shaped by Christian doctrine, the early centuries of this transition were anything but uniform. Christianity itself was not yet a single, cohesive entity, but a patchwork of diverse, sometimes conflicting beliefs. Among these early Christian sects, one of the most enigmatic and dangerous in the eyes of emerging orthodoxy was the Gnostic tradition. Gnosticism, derived from the Greek word gnosis, meaning knowledge, offered a profoundly different interpretation of the universe, the human soul, and the divine. Its teachings suggested that the material world was a flawed creation, the work of a lesser, imperfect deity, a demiurge, rather than a benevolent, singular God. Humanity, the Gnostics believed, contained within it a spark of the divine, trapped in flesh and illusion, waiting to be awakened through secret knowledge. To the early church fathers, these ideas were not mere theological disagreements, they were existential threats. If salvation could be found through personal revelation and inner knowledge, rather than through the church's sacraments and hierarchy, then the very structure of religious authority would crumble. The Gnostics spoke of realms beyond the visible world, of eons and spiritual mysteries, unmediated by priests or bishops. Their texts, named unfamiliar gospels, described hidden teachings allegedly imparted by Jesus to his closest disciples, and suggested that the truth had been distorted by those empowered. By the 4th century, as Christianity became the state religion of Rome under Emperor Constantine, orthodoxy hardened. The Council of Nicaea in 325 CE established a unified creed, condemning divergent teachings as heresy. In the decades that followed, imperial edicts and ecclesiastical orders sought to root out and destroy these subversive writings. Many Gnostic scriptures vanished in this purge, burned in public squares, hidden in caves, or quietly buried by those who refused to let them disappear. Only fragments survived in the writings of their enemies, quoted to refute them. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Apocryphon of John, names that, for centuries, lingered only as whispered legends. It wasn't until the accidental discovery of the Nag Hammadi Library in 1945, buried in the sands of Egypt, that the world glimpsed what had nearly been erased. 52 texts, bound in fragile leather codices, emerged from their long exile, revealing a radically different Christian narrative. In their pages, Jesus speaks in riddles, salvation comes from self-knowledge, and the structure of heaven itself is a layered, mystical hierarchy. These rediscovered Gnostic texts did not merely challenge theological orthodoxy. They disrupted the idea of a singular, linear religious history. They reminded the modern world that belief systems, like empires, are shaped by what survives, and that survival often depends not on truth, but on power. The suppression of the Gnostic tradition was not a unique event. It was part of a recurring pattern: inconvenient knowledge, dangerous ideas, and alternate worldviews systematically removed to preserve a preferred order. The Gnostics, with their hidden wisdom and rebellious theology, became another silenced voice in humanity's long conversation with the unknown, and another lesson in how history is crafted as much by the victors as by the vanquished. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the Yucatan Peninsula in the early 16th century, they encountered a civilization rich in astronomy, mathematics, ritual, and myth. The Maya were master timekeepers, architects of towering pyramids, and creators of one of the most intricate written languages in the ancient Americas. Their sacred texts, codices, crafted from bark paper and inscribed with hieroglyphic symbols, preserved centuries of accumulated knowledge, calendars, genealogies, medicinal lore, and stories of gods who walked both sky and earth. But to the missionaries who followed the conquistadors, these codices were not treasures of human culture. They were threats at the center of this cultural destruction. Stood Bishop Diego de Landa, a Franciscan friar driven by an unshakable conviction that he was saving souls from damnation. In 1562, in the town of Mahoney, de Landa ordered one of history's most infamous book burnings. Every Maya codex his priests could find was gathered and set alight in a public square. The delicate hand-painted pages turned to ash in the tropical air as de Landa watched, believing he was delivering the Maya people from the lies of the devil. In his own words, recorded in his Relación de las Cosas de Yucatán, de Landa confessed, "We found a large number of books, and since they contained nothing but superstitions and falsehoods of the devil, we burned them all, which the natives deeply regretted." It was an act of cultural devastation so complete that only 4 authentic Maya codices are known to survive. Today, scattered across museums in Dresden, Madrid, Paris, and Mexico City, these few fragile volumes, blackened and weathered with age, are all that remain of a written tradition stretching back centuries. The loss was not just textual. It severed a people's connection to their own history, rituals, and cosmology. The destruction of these codices meant the erasure of names, battles, treaties, sacred rites, and the nuanced understanding of a world built upon cycles of time and spiritual balance. It denied future generations of Maya descendants the full record of their ancestry, and it wasn't an isolated event. The burning of the Mayan codices reflected a recurring pattern: the deliberate destruction of inconvenient knowledge by those convinced of their moral or religious superiority. In the flames of Mahoney, one can glimpse echoes of Alexandria, of the Gnostic purges, and of countless other silences imposed by conquest. De Landa's actions, cloaked in the language of salvation, remind us that history's greatest losses are often justified not as acts of aggression, but as deeds of righteousness. And as with so many other times, what was lost in those fires was not just paper and ink, but the untold stories of a civilization, and the uncomfortable truths that might have challenged the victor's version of history. In December of 1945, in the arid hills near the small Egyptian town of Nag Hammadi, a chance discovery would crack open a long-sealed vault of ancient knowledge, one buried for over 1,500 years. It began not with scholars or archaeologists, but with a local farmer named Muhammad Ulsaman, who, while digging for fertilizer near a limestone cliff, struck something unexpected: a large, sealed earthenware jar. Inside were 13 leather-bound codices, brittle with age and tightly packed with pages of unfamiliar, ancient script. What Muhammad held in his hands was one of the most significant archaeological finds of the 20th century, a lost library of early Christian and Gnostic texts, thought to have been destroyed long ago in the sweeping purges of heretical writings. What lay within those crumbling pages was nothing less than an alternate telling of the origins of Christianity. Among the texts was the long-rumored Gospel of Thomas, a collection of sayings attributed to Jesus, many of which never appeared in the New Testament. There were also works like the Gospel of Philip, the Apocryphon of John, and the Gospel of Truth, each offering radically different visions of the divine, the cosmos, and the purpose of human life. These writings spoke of secret knowledge, gnosis, by which the soul might awaken to its divine origins and escape the flawed material world. They described complex heavens populated by eons, spiritual emanations, and a demiurge figure who had mistakenly crafted the physical universe. In these texts, salvation came not through institutional authority, but through inner revelation. For centuries, knowledge of these beliefs had come only through the writings of their opponents, early church fathers like Irenaeus and Hippolytus, who quoted them merely to condemn them. The Nag Hammadi discovery provided the world, for the first time, with the original voices of those long silenced communities. But like so many rediscoveries of ancient, inconvenient knowledge, the Nag Hammadi library's journey from the sands of Egypt to scholarly scrutiny was not immediate or uncomplicated. For years after its unearthing, the codices passed through the hands of antiquities dealers, private collectors, and reluctant authorities. Parts of the collection were lost, sold, or delayed by bureaucratic infighting, even after the texts began to be published in the 1970s and 1980s. Their content challenged both religious orthodoxy and established historical narratives. Questions arose. If such diverse and radical Christian teachings existed in the first centuries after Jesus' death, how had the Church come to be defined by a single, narrow doctrine? What else might have been lost or deliberately erased to preserve a unified theology? The Nag Hammadi Library is more than a collection of ancient manuscripts. It is a reminder of the many intellectual and spiritual traditions expunged by history's victors. It confirms what the burning of the Library of Alexandria, the suppression of Gnostic communities, and the destruction of Mayan codices all suggest: that history is not a neutral record of the past, but a contested landscape where knowledge is as often buried as it is preserved. And still today, the discovery at Nag Hammadi whispers an unsettling truth that even the foundations of the beliefs we hold most sacred may rest upon the silence of forgotten voices. When one steps back from these stories, the flames of Alexandria, the Gnostic purges, the smouldering pages of Mayan codices, and the long-forgotten jars of Nag Hammadi, a troubling pattern emerges across centuries, civilizations, and belief systems. The same instinct repeats itself: the desire to control knowledge, to silence voices that threaten orthodoxy, and to prune the historical record into something tidy, safe, and manageable. These aren't isolated incidents, nor are they merely the products of past ignorance. They reveal something deeper, a universal human discomfort with ambiguity and dissent, especially when it undermines those in power. Time and again, history shows us that knowledge is rarely neutral. It carries with it the weight of authority, the risk of subversion, and the power to reshape how entire societies understand their place in the world. And so the pattern endures. When Alexandria's scrolls turned to ash, it was not only literary treasure that was lost, but challenges to Rome's imperial order and the fragile theologies rising in its shadow. When Bishop Diego de Landa consigned Maya codices to the flames, he wasn't simply destroying pagan superstition. He was severing a people's connection to their past, ensuring that European narratives would dominate the New World. The suppression of Gnostic texts was a move, not just of theology, but of institutional self-preservation. A religion built on mystery and personal revelation would render formal hierarchies powerless. By eliminating those teachings, the early church consolidated authority into creeds, councils, and an unbroken chain of command. Even the Nag Hammadi library, buried in haste and rediscovered by accident, serves as a reminder that inconvenient truths can survive in shadows for centuries, waiting for a time when the world is either brave enough or curious enough to face them. This recurring pattern extends beyond religion. Rulers, empires, and even modern institutions have all practiced the quiet erasure of dangerous knowledge, sometimes through fire, sometimes through decree, sometimes simply by refusing to publish, to translate, or to teach. The result is a history, not of what truly happened, but of what was allowed to be remembered. And perhaps that is the most unsettling reflection of all. If so much has been lost, altered, or hidden before, what else, even now, lies quietly buried, forgotten in a monastery, vault, a bureaucratic archive, or beneath the sands of some unassuming hillside? What discoveries remain locked away because they threaten to append the stories we've come to accept about who we are and where we come from? The past is never as settled as it seems. History, like any story, is shaped by the teller and by those powerful enough to decide which stories are worth hearing. The recurring patterns of suppression serve not only as a cautionary tale, but as a challenge to question, to seek, and to remain wary of the comfortable histories handed down. Without question, for in every age there are voices deliberately silenced, texts purposefully lost, and truths too dangerous to be spoken aloud. Of all the scrolls unearthed in the caves of Qumran, one stands apart, not for what it says, but for what it is. While the other Dead Sea Scrolls were inked delicately on parchment or papyrus, fragile and yellowed with age, one scroll defied both medium and message. It was not written on animal skin or ancient paper, but painstakingly etched into sheets of hammered copper. Discovered in Cave 3 in 1952, the copper scroll immediately stirred the imaginations of scholars and treasure hunters alike. From the outset, it was unlike anything else found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. Not a religious text, nor a commentary on scripture, nor a community rulebook, but rather a list, a long cryptic inventory of secret locations and enormous hidden treasures. The scroll was in terrible condition, corroded and brittle, rolled so tightly and oxidized so thoroughly over nearly 2 millennia that it could not be safely unrolled. To preserve its contents, it was cut into sections, an act some criticized at the time, though no other means of accessing its secrets existed. Once opened, the text revealed something remarkable. In archaic Hebrew, it listed over 60 sites, where vast quantities of gold, silver, and sacred vessels were supposedly concealed. The entries were precise, naming measurements in talents and cubits, and referencing landmarks, such as in the cistern at the mouth of the valley or beneath the stairs in the east-facing tomb. The total amount of treasure claimed in the copper scroll was staggering. Some estimates suggest over 200 tons of precious metals. But what was perhaps more baffling than the promised riches was the scroll's context. The other Dead Sea Scrolls were religious in nature, works of philosophy, scripture, prophecy, and law. The copper scroll, by contrast, read like a meticulous treasure map, a kind of ancient inventory list penned with astonishing specificity. Scholars quickly began to debate its origin and purpose. Was it the inventory of the Second Temple's treasure, hidden away before the Roman siege of Jerusalem in 70 CE? A cache of wealth belonging to the Essenes, the ascetic Jewish sect often associated with the Qumran community, or something even older, dating back to the time of the First Temple and the Babylonian conquest centuries before? No definitive answers have emerged. Expeditions were mounted to search for the buried treasures described in the scroll. Caves were excavated, dry riverbeds scoured, and ancient cisterns emptied, but no hoards of gold or silver have ever been found, at least none publicly acknowledged. Some claim that Israeli authorities quietly recovered certain items and suppressed the discoveries for reasons unknown. Others argue that the treasures were long since plundered or never existed at all. A further enigma lies in the scroll's language and writing style. Unlike the more traditional Hebrew script of the other Dead Sea Scrolls, the Copper Scroll is written in a harsher, more technical dialect, a language of measurements and directions, devoid of theological commentary. It suggests not a religious purpose, but a logistical one, the kind used by officials or temple administrators tasked with hiding wealth in times of crisis. And then there's the question no one has answered: why inscribe such a document on copper? Was it meant to endure centuries, hidden away in a cave, to await a time when it might safely be recovered? Or was it intended as a decoy, a deliberate lure to distract looters from the real treasures concealed elsewhere? The Copper Scroll remains one of archaeology's most tantalizing mysteries, a silent, unyielding artifact that hints at a lost world of sacred wealth, political intrigue, and the careful concealment of power. But whether it is a true map, a symbolic text, or an elaborate ruse, one truth persists: its secrets are still buried somewhere beneath the dust of Judea, or in the locked archives of those who wish them to remain forgotten. The story of the Dead Sea Scrolls might have been sensational enough with the discovery of 11 caves housing thousands of ancient manuscripts. But the tale does not end there. Whispers and rumors have long circulated among scholars, local Bedouins, and treasure hunters alike, tales of additional undisclosed caves holding scrolls and artifacts even more mysterious, more secretive, and more profoundly unsettling than those already known. The official archaeological record catalogues 11 caves in the Qumran region where scrolls and fragments have been recovered. However, references in early explorer journals and the oral traditions of the Bedouin tribes that inhabit the Judean desert hint at the existence of at least 3 more caves, commonly referred to in scholarly circles as Caves 7, 11, and 12. What makes these caves so compelling is not just their mysterious status, but what some believe they contain. While the scrolls in the first 11 caves mainly consist of biblical texts, sectarian writings, and legal codes, whispers speak of these additional caves, harboring scrolls that were never meant for public eyes. Scrolls containing forbidden knowledge, dangerous prophecies, or even heretical doctrines that could rewrite history. Cave 7 is perhaps the most enigmatic. Unlike the earlier caves, where fragments of manuscripts in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek were found, Cave 7 reportedly contained texts written in an unusual language, possibly an archaic dialect or a coded script. Few scholars have had access to fragments reportedly retrieved from this cave, and those who have remained tight-lipped. Some speculate these writings relate to mystical rites or hidden teachings of the Essenes, the ascetic community believed to have inhabited the Qumran settlement, moving south. Cave 11, rediscovered in the 1950s, produced a rare and remarkable find, the Temple Scroll, a massive parchment outlining an idealized version of the Jewish temple and its laws. But alongside this scroll, rumors of concealed chambers within the cave itself have persisted. Local guides tell stories of sealed niches and alcoves, places too dangerous or sacred for early explorers to disturb. Some believe these sealed spaces contain additional scrolls or artifacts so controversial that their revelation might challenge the foundations of both Judaism and Christianity. Then there is Cave 12, the most elusive of all. Unlike the other caves, which have been officially excavated, Cave 12 remains largely unexplored. Its precise location is often described as hidden in a remote and treacherous section of the Judean cliffs, accessible only by those familiar with the unforgiving terrain. Bedouin lore speaks of this cave as a vault of final secrets, where the most dangerous and powerful writings were secreted away to prevent their destruction or misuse. The secrecy surrounding these caves has fueled decades of speculation and conspiracy theories. Were these caves deliberately concealed or even sealed by ancient custodians, aware of the explosive knowledge contained within? Did early church authorities or Roman officials pressure local communities to keep their existence hidden, fearing the upheaval such texts might provoke? More controversially, some modern scholars and treasure hunters allege that governments and religious institutions have suppressed access to these caves. Classified documents and whispered leaks suggest that expeditions may have been restricted, and certain fragments removed from public view to avoid theological or political fallout. The line between archaeological research and covert control blurs in the harsh desert air. Satellite imagery and modern remote sensing technology have identified cave formations and tunnels that remain unexcavated or inaccessible due to political sensitivities and preservation concerns. These unidentified sites tantalize the imagination. Could they be the key to understanding lost chapters of history, or do they hold only mundane geological secrets? Moreover, the dangers of exploring such caves cannot be overstated. The rugged cliffs, unpredictable weather, and potential for collapse make physical expeditions perilous. This natural protection has, ironically, preserved these sites from overzealous disturbance, but has also prevented scholars from fully uncovering their mysteries. The legends of undisclosed caves echo a timeless theme: knowledge guarded, hidden, and perhaps forbidden, like the Copper Scroll's tantalizing treasure map. These hidden caves symbolize not only what was lost, but what might yet be found, waiting patiently in darkness to re-emerge into the light of understanding. Among the many enigmas locked away in the Dead Sea caves, whispers persist of apocalyptic prophecies, texts that speak of cataclysmic events, cosmic battles, and the final reckoning of humanity. These are not mere predictions, they are warnings, etched in time, sealed away for millennia, deemed too volatile or too revealing for the world to read. The known Dead Sea Scrolls contain numerous references to end times visions, but scholars believe the fragments we have uncovered are only fragments of a much larger prophetic corpus, much of it still hidden or withheld. Some of these texts speak in vivid, often symbolic language about a war between forces of light and darkness. a Messiah figure who will restore justice, and a purging fire that will cleanse the earth. Why were such writings sealed away? One theory suggests that the sect at Qumran, possibly the Essenes, believed their community was living in the end days, a time when the forces of evil were gathering strength and the old order was crumbling. They might have hidden these prophecies to protect their sacred knowledge from enemies, or to preserve it until the prophesied moment arrived. The nature of these apocalyptic texts also posed a serious threat to religious authorities. The descriptions of multiple messianic figures, heavenly beings defying traditional orthodoxy, and divine judgment beyond the accepted canon challenged the theological monopoly of early Jewish and Christian institutions. If fully revealed, such prophecies could have shaken the very foundations of belief systems and altered the course of religious history. Adding to the mystery, there are persistent rumors of scrolls containing specific timelines or coded messages about future events. Some claim that ancient prophecies, concealed within these sealed scrolls, align eerily with modern upheavals, wars, natural disasters, and societal collapses, sparking debates about whether these texts were timeless warnings or manipulative fabrications. Moreover, the question of who controls access to these apocalyptic writings intensifies the intrigue. Over the decades, certain manuscripts have been kept from publication or restricted to a closed circle of scholars. Some fragments, allegedly too controversial or disturbing, remain locked in archives, their contents hinted at but never fully disclosed. The secrecy fuels speculation. Are these prophecies still sealed because of their explosive potential, or because they contain truths that humanity is not yet ready to confront? Across history, apocalyptic literature has served dual roles, both as a source of hope for a new beginning and as a harbinger of dread. The Dead Sea Scrolls' hidden prophecies fit this pattern, suspended between revelation and concealment, their full messages shrouded in mystery. As we peer into these ancient shadows, one cannot help but wonder, what messages were the ancients trying to preserve, and why did they choose silence? Are these sealed prophecies dormant warnings waiting for a destined hour, or mere echoes of a past consumed by fear and power struggles? The apocalyptic scrolls, still hidden from public view, remain a testament to humanity's enduring fascination, an apprehension with the unknown, with fate, and with the final chapters of history yet to be written. Among the many enigmas surrounding the Dead Sea Scrolls, perhaps the most tantalizing and provocative are the theories that some of these ancient manuscripts serve as treasure maps, cryptic guides, pointing to vast caches of hidden artifacts, gold, sacred relics, or lost knowledge buried deep beneath the desert sands. Central to this theory is the infamous Copper Scroll, unlike any other Dead Sea manuscript. Forged not on fragile parchment, but engraved on thin sheets of copper, its very material speaks to a different purpose: permanence, secrecy, and durability. Instead of religious texts or mystical teachings, the Copper Scroll appears to be a detailed inventory, listing locations of hidden treasures, vast quantities of gold, silver, and precious objects scattered across dozens of sites in the Judean wilderness. What makes the Copper Scroll especially mystifying is its cryptic descriptions. Instead of straightforward directions, it offers references to landmarks long vanished or renamed, uses obscure place names, and employs coded language. Scholars have spent decades trying to decipher the scroll's precise meaning, but it's true. Secrets remain elusive. Some believe it marks the treasures of the Second Temple priests, hidden before the Roman destruction in 70 CE. Others argue it could point to caches buried even earlier, from the era of the Hasmoneans or Essenes, beyond the Copper Scroll. Other theories suggest that various caves in the region, perhaps even those undisclosed ones whispered about by Bedouins, conceal artifacts of immense cultural and historical value. These could range from ritual objects to sacred relics, perhaps scrolls or items deemed to be dangerous or heretical to expose. One popular speculation connects these hidden treasures to the legendary treasures of the Jewish temple itself. Throughout history, numerous accounts describe the temple's wealth: golden vessels, sacred instruments, and artifacts imbued with religious significance that vanished following successive sieges and conquests. Could some of this wealth have been secreted away, hidden by faithful custodians seeking to protect their heritage from destruction or desecration? Adding fuel to the fire are stories of secret expeditions and covert excavations, allegedly commissioned or influenced by governments and religious authorities seeking to locate and control these treasures, whether motivated by politics, theology, or greed. These efforts may have kept important discoveries from reaching public knowledge, ensuring that the treasures remain buried both physically and in silence. The notion of treasure maps also extends metaphorically. Beyond gold and artifacts, the scrolls themselves might be maps to lost spiritual or esoteric knowledge, keys to understanding forgotten rituals, secret wisdom traditions, or alternative historical narratives that challenge orthodox teachings. Such theories, while often dismissed by mainstream archaeology as fanciful, persist because of the tantalizing evidence, scattered clues in the scrolls, ancient references in historical texts, and the very act of hiding these manuscripts in remote caves. The deliberate concealment suggests not just preservation, but protection from those who might misuse or destroy them. Whether the treasures are material riches or intangible knowledge, the idea captures a universal human fascination: the quest for hidden truths and the promise of uncovering what has long been lost. The Dead Sea Scrolls, with their cryptic texts and enigmatic origins, continue to inspire explorers, scholars, and dreamers to search beyond the surface, to question what lies beneath the dust and silence. In the end, the mystery of the treasure, maps, and hidden artifacts remains open, a puzzle inviting future generations to dare the desert's harshness, decode the ancient scripts, and perhaps unlock secrets that have waited in the shadows for 2 millennia. Throughout history, humanity has been haunted by stories of secret knowledge, wisdom too powerful, too dangerous, or too transformative to be revealed to all. These legends swirl around the Dead Sea Scrolls like a veil of mystery, whispering that the scrolls are but fragments of a far greater, hidden trove of insight, buried beneath the sands or locked away in concealed vaults, waiting patiently for the right moment or the right person to uncover them. Such legends transcend the physical artifacts themselves and enter the realm of myth and prophecy. The Judean desert, with its stark beauty and ancient silence, becomes a fitting backdrop for tales of lost scrolls, secret teachings, and sacred archives, concealed by ancestors who foresaw that their knowledge might ignite upheaval or transformation. Beyond the imagination of their own time, many of these broader legends suggest that the Dead Sea Scrolls represent only a fraction of the truth, a curated selection, the tip of a vast iceberg of concealed wisdom. Stories speak of scrolls that describe origins of humanity that challenge orthodox histories, ancient science and cosmology far more advanced than modern understanding, and spiritual teachings that promise awakening and liberation from bondage. 1. Enduring legend speaks of the Book of Secrets, an unseen manuscript said to contain the full revelation of divine mysteries. According to whispered traditions, this text holds the keys to understanding the true nature of creation, the hidden forces shaping the universe, and the ultimate destiny of mankind. Yet, this book of secrets has never been found. Some believe it was hidden alongside the Dead Sea Scrolls, carefully guarded by a secret brotherhood, whose descendants remain to this day. Another myth revolves around the hidden library, an underground vault or cave complex said to hold thousands of scrolls and artifacts yet to be unearthed. This vault supposedly escaped detection by early archaeologists, its existence hinted at in obscure references in ancient texts and coded clues scattered across the region. Some claim it was sealed deliberately, a safeguard against times of persecution or destruction. These legends evoke parallels with other mysterious discoveries worldwide, such as the Nag Hammadi Library in Egypt, which unveiled lost Gnostic Gospels, the Silk Road's secret Buddhist manuscripts, or Tibetan texts believed to be repositories of esoteric wisdom. The Dead Sea Scrolls stand as a focal point in this global tapestry of hidden knowledge, a symbol of what might lie concealed beneath layers of history and silence. Compounding the intrigue is the modern context. The digital age and the explosion of information have paradoxically led to renewed secrecy. Some whisper that governmental or religious powers continue to suppress or control access to this hidden knowledge, fearing its power to challenge established narratives or disrupt social orders. In parallel, popular culture and conspiracy theories have embraced the mystery, weaving tales of secret societies, ancient astronauts, and time-defying technologies buried in desert caves. While often speculative or fantastical, these stories underscore the profound human yearning for discovery and understanding beyond the apparent yet. Beneath the sensationalism lies a deeper truth. The quest for knowledge is inseparable from the quest for meaning. The Dead Sea Scrolls, with their fractured parchments and coded language, embody the tension between revelation and concealment, between the past's silence and the future's promise. Whether the hidden knowledge is spiritual, historical, or scientific, the enduring legends remind us that the story is unfinished. Each new fragment uncovered is a step closer to illuminating forgotten chapters of human history, but many questions remain. What else lies buried, waiting in the shadows? Who will be the ones brave and patient enough to decode the ancient whispers? And what will the world become when these secrets finally come to light? The broader legends surrounding the Dead Sea Scrolls invite us to embrace mystery not as a void but as a space pregnant with possibility. They challenge us to look beyond what we know and consider the vast, unseen layers of history still waiting beneath the earth, hidden in silence, but alive in story. If the full truth behind the Dead Sea Scrolls and their hidden contents were to emerge, the impact on religious landscapes worldwide could be profound and far-reaching. The scrolls, after all, are not mere ancient manuscripts, they are relics from a tumultuous period when competing religious ideas wrestled for dominance, and doctrines were still fluid, forming the bedrock of faith systems that shape billions today. At the heart of the matter lies a fundamental challenge: the potential destabilization of long-held religious narratives. The scrolls predate many canonical texts and provide glimpses into beliefs and sects considered heretical or marginalized by later orthodoxy. Their revelation threatens to unsettle the neat, authoritative histories that institutional religions have constructed over centuries. Imagine, for instance, that teachings uncovered among the scrolls reveal alternative views of the Messiah, views that diverge from Christian or Jewish orthodoxies. What if these texts portray the Messiah not as a singular divine figure, but as a symbol open to multiple interpretations? Or if they suggest that early Jewish sects, such as the Essenes, had mystical beliefs and practices that later religious authorities suppressed? Such revelations could ignite theological debates, challenging core doctrines of divine incarnation, salvation, and prophecy. Moreover, the scroll's contents touch on topics like angelology, cosmology, and eschatology, the study of the end times, where divergent perspectives could confront established dogma. If the scrolls disclose apocalyptic prophecies or sacred knowledge that conflicts with official scripture, believers might face crises of faith, forcing a re-examination of foundational beliefs. This potential upheaval could ripple through religious institutions, unsettling hierarchies and prompting debates about the legitimacy of scripture and tradition. Clergy and theologians might find themselves grappling with uncomfortable questions. Were certain books excluded from the Bible to maintain control? Have some teachings been deliberately erased to uphold political or theological agendas? In some religious communities, especially those with tightly controlled doctrines, the emergence of suppressed texts might provoke resistance, denial, or even censorship. The revelation of alternate histories and spiritual teachings could be seen as a threat not only to faith but also to communal identity and authority. On the other hand, some might embrace these findings as opportunities for renewal and deeper understanding. Progressive religious thinkers and scholars could view the scrolls as a bridge to reconnect with early, diverse spiritual expressions, fostering interfaith dialogue and expanding conceptions of the divine. However, the effects would not be confined to theology alone. Faith communities rely on shared narratives to foster social cohesion, moral order, and a sense of purpose. Disrupting these narratives could create uncertainty, anxiety, and divisions within congregations, especially where religious identity is intertwined with cultural or national identity. Furthermore, the impact could extend beyond Judaism and Christianity, because the scrolls emerge from a milieu that influenced early Islam and other spiritual traditions. Revelations might spark wider re-evaluations across religious boundaries, reshaping how history and sacred texts are viewed globally. Ultimately, the religious consequences of unveiling hidden truths would likely unfold over decades, involving negotiation between tradition and discovery, skepticism and acceptance. They would force humanity to confront fundamental questions. How do we reconcile faith with evolving knowledge? Can spiritual truths be plural and multifaceted? And what does it mean when the past challenges the certainties of the present? The Dead Sea Scrolls stand at the crossroads of this tension, reminding us that religious narratives are not static monuments, but living, breathing stories subject to revision, reinterpretation, and rediscovery. And within their fragile, ancient fragments lies the potential not only to destabilize, but also to inspire a profound spiritual awakening. History, as we know it, is often presented as a linear, uncontested narrative, a tidy sequence of events that define civilizations, cultures, and identities. But the Dead Sea Scrolls, with their cryptic contents and fragmented whispers, hint at something far more complex, alternative origin stories that challenge the dominant historical accounts taught in schools, celebrated in monuments, and sanctified by official histories. If the full breadth of these ancient texts were revealed and authenticated, historians, archaeologists, and scholars would face the monumental task of revisiting foundational chapters of human civilization. The conventional timelines, the accepted genealogies of peoples and nations, the birth of religious movements, even the origins of law and governance each could be called into question. One of the most provocative implications lies in the very roots of Judeo-Christian history. The scrolls emerge from a time when Judaism was not monolithic but a tapestry of sects: Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, zealots, each with divergent beliefs, practices, and expectations of the future. Alternative narratives embedded in the scrolls may reveal lost theological perspectives, ritual customs, and societal structures that reshape our understanding of early Jewish identity. More radically, the scrolls could shed light on previously unknown movements that influenced or competed with the early followers of Jesus. Texts hinting at alternative messianic expectations or divergent theological doctrines might suggest that Christianity, as it later crystallized, was but one of several competing visions emerging from this fertile religious landscape. Such revelations could prompt historians to reconsider how Christianity evolved, the forces that shaped its dominance, and the stories that were marginalized or erased. Beyond religious history, the scrolls might also offer clues about the geopolitical realities of the region, insights into the lives of common people, tribal alliances, and the shifting control between empires such as the Seleucids, Ptolemies, and Romans. Lost historical accounts hidden in the scrolls may reveal alternative political dynamics and social orders overshadowed by victors' histories. Moreover, the scrolls might challenge accepted chronologies. Radiocarbon dating and paleographic studies suggest some texts are far older or younger than previously assumed. Could the origins of literacy, legal codes, or philosophical thought have deeper, older roots than mainstream history admits? If so, the rewriting of ancient history could extend well beyond the Near East, impacting how civilizations from Mesopotamia to Egypt and beyond are contextualized. The possibility also exists that the scrolls contain narratives that connect disparate cultures in surprising ways: early contact between peoples, shared mythologies, or parallel spiritual traditions that challenge the idea of isolated cultural development. This could redefine understandings of ancient globalization, trade routes, and knowledge exchange, painting a picture of a far more interconnected ancient world. Yet, rewriting history is never merely academic. Historical narratives shape national identities, political claims, and cultural pride. Alternative origin stories emerging from the scrolls could provoke controversy and resistance. National or religious groups might reject revisions that threaten cherished founding myths or undermine political legitimacy. For example, if the scrolls suggest different timelines or authorships for sacred texts central to modern nations, diplomatic tensions could arise. Archaeological claims based on new histories might challenge territorial boundaries or cultural heritage ownership, complicating already sensitive geopolitical issues. At the same time, the rewriting of history offers hope for reconciliation and deeper understanding. By exposing the complexity and plurality of ancient origins, the scrolls could foster appreciation for shared roots and common humanity. They remind us that history is not a monolith, but a mosaic of voices, many lost or suppressed, but waiting to be heard in the digital era, where information flows freely and old authorities are questioned. The arrival of alternative origin stories could catalyze a more nuanced engagement with the past, one that embraces ambiguity, diversity, and the provisional nature of knowledge. It might inspire new scholarly methodologies, collaborative research, and interdisciplinary dialogue bridging archaeology, theology, linguistics, and anthropology. Ultimately, the Dead Sea Scrolls beckon us toward humility and curiosity. They invite us to acknowledge that history is a living story, continuously rewritten as new evidence emerges and old assumptions dissolve. What was once dismissed as heresy or myth may in fact hold vital keys to understanding who we are and where we come from. As the fragments of ancient parchments slowly yield their secrets, the potential for rewriting history remains one of the most compelling and unsettling possibilities in modern scholarships. The question lingers: how ready is the world to embrace a past that is richer, stranger, and more complex than previously imagined? If the hidden prophecies within the Dead Sea Scrolls and related texts were to come fully into public view, their social and political impact could be as seismic as their religious and historical consequences. Ancient prophecies are not merely relics of the past, they are powerful narratives that shape worldviews, inspire movements, and influence decision-making even today. The resurfacing of previously unknown or suppressed prophecies could catalyze waves of social upheaval and political recalibration. One immediate social effect might be the rise of new movements or revival of forgotten sects who interpret these prophecies as calls to action. Throughout history, prophecy has fueled revolutions, reformations, and mass mobilizations. If the scrolls contain apocalyptic visions or divine mandates, yet unrecognized by mainstream religions, they could serve as rallying points for groups who feel disenfranchised or seek radical change. Politically, governments and institutions might face challenges to their legitimacy if ancient prophecies are seen as foretelling current events or predicting imminent transformations. In volatile regions, especially those with deeply intertwined religious and national identities, such revelations could inflame tensions or embolden factions pushing agendas rooted in spiritual destiny. Moreover, established political powers that have historically aligned themselves with dominant religious narratives might find themselves undermined. If new prophecies suggest alternate interpretations of leadership, justice, or divine favor, the ideological foundations supporting rulers or regimes could be destabilized. International relations might also be affected. Nations whose histories and borders are bound to religious identity could witness heightened conflicts over whose version of prophecy is true. Diplomatic dialogues may need to navigate a complex terrain of belief, history, and emerging revelations. On a broader societal scale, the public's trust in traditional sources of authority, whether religious leaders, historians, or political institutions, could erode. As ancient prophecies challenge accepted truths, people might seek alternative sources of knowledge, including fringe groups or conspiratorial narratives, potentially deepening social polarization. Yet, amid these challenges, lies the possibility for profound dialogue and renewal. New prophecies might inspire efforts toward peace, justice, and environmental stewardship, interpreting ancient warnings as urgent calls for collective responsibility in democratic societies. The dissemination of these prophecies could spark widespread debates about faith, governance, and human destiny, forcing communities to grapple with the meaning of history and prophecy in a modern context. Ultimately, the unveiling of ancient prophecies hidden within the scrolls serves as a potent reminder. Knowledge is never neutral. It wields the power to shape societies, influence politics, and redefine identities. The past, far from being settled, is an active force in the present capable of stirring change, conflict, and hope. As we stand at the edge of known history, with the Dead Sea Scrolls partially unveiled yet still shrouded in mystery, it is natural to wonder what other secrets remain hidden, locked away from the light of day. The scrolls, remarkable as they are, may represent only a fraction of ancient knowledge deliberately concealed, lost, or suppressed across millennia. The very existence of undisclosed caves, missing fragments, and withheld documents suggests a labyrinth of secrecy extending beyond what scholars have accessed. What if entire libraries of ancient wisdom texts that could radically alter our understanding of spirituality, science, or histories still lie buried beneath the earth or hidden in forgotten archives? Could there be scrolls containing forbidden knowledge on advanced technologies, forgotten civilizations, or even alternate cosmologies that challenge the fundamental assumptions of modern science? Many speculate that some scrolls and artifacts were deliberately destroyed or spirited away by religious or political authorities fearful of their disruptive potential. Throughout history, powerful institutions have often deemed certain knowledge too dangerous or subversive for public consumption. The fear was not merely of controversy, but of upheaval, of dismantling established orders and questioning the legitimacy of rulers, priests, and prevailing worldviews. Consider the Copper Scroll, an enigmatic text listing treasures supposedly hidden away in secret locations. If those riches represent not only material wealth, but also knowledge encoded in symbolic form, their recovery could trigger a renaissance of lost arts or philosophies. Yet, so far, no treasure has been definitively found, deepening the aura of mystery beyond physical artifacts. The scrolls hint at suppressed spiritual teachings, mystical insights, and apocalyptic visions that could transform personal faith and collective consciousness. Could there be texts elucidating human origins, the nature of the soul, or cosmic cycles that remain sealed for reasons of fear, censorship, or lost language skills? The very idea invites both hope and caution. Moreover, the digital age brings a paradox. While information flows more freely than ever, some secrets may now be hidden behind layers of bureaucratic red tape, classified archives, or even digital algorithms controlling the flow of knowledge. Vast troves of historical data and archaeological findings could be quietly withheld, sanitized, or forgotten, awaiting discovery by a future generation willing to look beyond conventional narratives. Speculating further, what if some knowledge was hidden to protect humanity? Ancient civilizations might have concealed dangerous truths, technologies capable of destruction, or spiritual teachings to advance for early societies to safely handle. Perhaps the gatekeepers of history acted as guardians, preserving select fragments while burying others until a right time emerges. Yet, the more we speculate, the clearer it becomes that history's hidden chapters are not mere curiosities, but keys to understanding our present and future. Unlocking these secrets could redefine identity, ethics, and the trajectory of civilization itself. The challenge remains: are we prepared intellectually, spiritually, and socially to confront truths that could upend long-held beliefs? Will the unveiling of hidden knowledge unite or divide, inspire progress or chaos? As scholars, seekers, and citizens of an interconnected world, we face a collective responsibility to seek, to question, and to remain open to the unknown, even if it unsettles the foundations upon which we stand. The scrolls, the caves, the missing texts, they beckon us onward. History is unfinished, a living tapestry woven with threads yet to be uncovered. What lies locked away may yet illuminate the darkness of the past and light the path forward. Throughout human history, knowledge has never been a neutral commodity freely available to all. Instead, it has been a powerful currency, one tightly controlled by those who understood its ability to shape thought, influence societies, and maintain or challenge power structures. But who truly controls knowledge, and more importantly, why? At the heart of this question lies an ancient dynamic, the intersection of information, authority, and human ambition. Those who hold knowledge often hold the keys to shaping reality, itself defining what is true, what is taught, and what is forgotten. This control can take many forms, from the guardians of sacred texts in ancient temples to the gatekeepers of modern academic, religious, or political institutions. In the earliest civilizations, scribes, priests, and scholars were entrusted as custodians of knowledge. Their role was not merely to preserve facts, but to interpret and contextualize them according to religious doctrines or political agendas. Controlling access to sacred writings, ritual knowledge, or scientific insights ensured that authority remained centralized and unquestioned. It was a system designed to maintain social order and reinforce the legitimacy of rulers or priests. This pattern is vividly reflected in stories, like the concealment and selective release of the Dead Sea Scrolls, where religious orthodoxy and political power intertwined to decide what knowledge was safe for the public hand, what had to remain hidden. The very idea that some texts were deemed heretical or dangerous underscores a profound truth. Knowledge can threaten the status quo. But why is knowledge so threatening? Because it empowers. It gives individuals or groups the tools to question prevailing narratives, challenge injustice, or envision alternative futures. Those in power understand that controlling knowledge means controlling perception. If people believe only one version of history, one interpretation of law, or one set of spiritual truths, then dissent is muted, and control is sustained. In the modern era, this control takes on new, often subtler forms. Institutions such as universities, governments, media outlets, and even corporations influence what information is disseminated, how research is funded, and which voices are amplified or silenced. The democratizing potential of the internet clashes with the realities of algorithmic filtering, information overload, and digital gatekeepers entities deciding what we see, hear, and learn. Historical examples remind us of how knowledge was once controlled through physical means, book burnings, censored scrolls, hidden archives. Today, knowledge control often happens through data censorship, intellectual property laws, and curated narratives shaped by political or economic interests. The question remains, who decides what knowledge is legitimate and who gets to tell the story? The motivations for controlling knowledge are as varied as the forces that seek it. Sometimes, it's a genuine fear of chaos or misunderstanding. Other times, it's ambition, greed, or the desire to preserve privilege. Leaders may suppress scientific findings that threaten their authority or religious. Groups might reject teachings that contradict orthodox beliefs. Corporations can withhold research to protect profits. Nations may manipulate historical narratives to foster nationalism. Yet, the human thirst for knowledge persists. Even as gatekeepers try to contain or filter information, seekers find ways to uncover hidden truths through archaeology, whistleblowing, underground literature, or digital activism. This tension between concealment and revelation is a defining feature of human civilization. Understanding who controls knowledge and why is not merely an academic exercise. It is a call to vigilance. It challenges us to ask, are we passive consumers of filtered truths, or active participants in seeking, questioning, and sharing knowledge? In reflecting on the Dead Sea Scrolls and other suppressed histories, we see the profound impact of knowledge control not just on what we know, but on who we become. Knowledge shapes identity, culture, and power. It can enlighten or enslave, liberate or manipulate. Ultimately, the question echoes through time: will knowledge remain the privilege of a few, or become the right of all? History is not merely a chronicle of events. It is the story we tell ourselves about who we are, where we come from, and where we might go. But what happens when the truths that underpin these stories remain hidden, buried beneath layers of time, censorship, and deliberate erasure? The weight of hidden truths has shaped civilizations far more profoundly than many realize, casting long shadows over culture, identity, and power. Civilizations are built on foundations of knowledge of laws, beliefs, histories, and values. When those foundations are incomplete or manipulated, the entire structure becomes vulnerable to cracks. Hidden truths, once revealed or suppressed, can alter the course of entire societies. They influence how people perceive themselves and their place in the world. Consider how ancient scrolls, manuscripts, and oral traditions that never reached public eyes could have radically changed religious doctrines, political legitimacy, or social hierarchies. The Dead Sea Scrolls, for example, contain fragments of writings that diverge from canonical texts, revealing alternative beliefs and practices that challenge mainstream religious narratives. What if these hidden truths had been part of collective knowledge from the start? The ripple effects on faith, law, and identity could have been enormous throughout history. Knowledge has been selectively shared or concealed to serve interests, to justify conquests, maintain social order, or suppress dissent. This selective sharing creates a history that is part fact, part myth, and part propaganda. Civilizations built on such uneven foundations may seem stable, but the suppressed truths linger, waiting to surface and challenge accepted wisdom. The weight of these concealed narratives is not only historical, but deeply psychological and cultural. When entire communities realize their heritage has been hidden or distorted, a profound sense of loss and disorientation can occur. Reclaiming hidden truths becomes an act of healing and empowerment, redefining identity and restoring dignity. Moreover, hidden knowledge often holds keys to understanding human progress more fully: technological innovations, philosophical insights, or social practices lost to time because they were deemed threatening or inconvenient. The loss of the Library of Alexandria, for instance, symbolizes not just the destruction of texts, but the erasure of countless ideas that might have accelerated scientific and cultural advancement. What knowledge could have flourished if those lost works had survived? Civilizations shaped by incomplete or distorted histories may inadvertently perpetuate cycles of misunderstanding and conflict. When truth is obscured, myths fill the gaps, fueling prejudice, exclusion, or nationalism. The burden of hidden truths thus extends beyond academic curiosity. It affects social cohesion and intercultural relations. Yet, the uncovering of hidden knowledge is often met with resistance, fear, or denial. This resistance stems from the disruptive potential of these truths to challenge power structures and established beliefs. Civilizations that confront uncomfortable histories must grapple with uncomfortable questions about justice, accountability, and transformation. At the same time, rediscovering suppressed knowledge can inspire profound renewal. It invites societies to broaden their perspectives, embrace complexity, and cultivate humility. Acknowledging that history is not a fixed narrative, but a tapestry of diverse voices and experiences, enriches civilization's collective wisdom. The tension between concealment and revelation creates a dynamic force that drives human curiosity and progress. Archaeologists, historians, and seekers of truth continue to unearth hidden layers, rewriting what we know and expanding our understanding of the past and present. In this way, the weight of hidden truths is both a burden and a catalyst. It reminds us that civilization is an ongoing story, one that requires vigilance, openness, and courage to confront the shadows as well as the light. As we reflect on the legacies of hidden knowledge from ancient scrolls to suppressed manuscripts, we confront a central question: how might our world be different if more truths had been allowed to emerge freely and fully? The answers to that question lie not only in the past, but in how we choose to engage with knowledge today. Power and knowledge have always shared a complex, intertwined relationship, one where knowledge can be both a tool for liberation and a weapon for control. The ambitions of rulers, religious authorities, and political elites often hinge on the control of information. What is taught, what is forgotten, and what is actively suppressed. This dynamic has fueled a pervasive fear of inconvenient knowledge throughout history. Inconvenient knowledge is knowledge that threatens established power structures, challenges dominant ideologies, or disrupts carefully crafted narratives. It is knowledge that, if widely known, could undermine the legitimacy of rulers or institutions, expose hypocrisies, or empower marginalized voices. For those in power, the risk is clear. The revelation of truths that destabilize authority can lead to loss of control, rebellion, or societal upheaval. Ambition drives many to not only acquire knowledge, but also to shape and limit it. The histories of book burnings, banned texts, and silenced scholars reveal a consistent pattern. Knowledge is often curated to serve ambition rather than truth. From the destruction of the Library of Alexandria to the censorship of heretical texts by religious councils, the fear of what inconvenient knowledge might inspire has led to systematic efforts to erase it. This fear is not merely theoretical. Those who possess power understand that knowledge can inspire action, whether political revolutions, shifts in belief systems, or demands for justice. Controlling knowledge means controlling the narrative of what is possible and acceptable. It allows the powerful to maintain a grip on collective memory and influence the direction of civilizations. Consider how certain archaeological discoveries or ancient manuscripts have been delayed, hidden, or selectively released because they pose challenges to dominant religious or political narratives. The Dead Sea Scrolls, with their alternative perspectives on messianic prophecy and community organization, threatened to unsettle religious orthodoxy. The slow, monopolized study and guarded dissemination of these texts exemplify the lengths to which gatekeepers will go to contain disruptive knowledge. The ambition behind controlling knowledge is also tied to identity and legitimacy. Rulers often justify their authority through narratives that trace lineage to divine or heroic origins. Inconvenient truths that question these origins risk unraveling the foundational myths of states and religions. Hence, suppressing such knowledge becomes a defensive actor, bid to protect not just power, but collective identity. Yet, fear of inconvenient knowledge can stifle progress and breed paranoia. Societies that resist confronting uncomfortable truths risk becoming trapped in cycles of dogma, misinformation, and conflict. The very act of hiding knowledge can can create suspicion and conspiracy, eroding trust between rulers and the ruled. At the same time, ambition can also drive seekers of truth to challenge these barriers, risking exile, persecution, or worse. The history of intellectual pursuit is marked by those courageous enough to unearth suppressed knowledge, pushing back against fear and control. Their work often paves the way for social transformation and expanded understanding. In the modern era, the mechanisms of controlling knowledge have evolved, but the underlying motivations remain. The fear of inconvenient truths now operates within complex systems of media, academia, and technology, where algorithms and editorial choices can amplify or silence voices. Ultimately, the tension between power, ambition, and inconvenient knowledge shapes the trajectory of civilizations. It is a reminder that knowledge is never neutral. It is embedded in struggles over authority, identity, and the future. To engage with knowledge honestly requires awareness of these forces and a commitment to question whose interests are served by the knowledge we receive and what might be left in the shadows. In an age defined by unprecedented access to information, it might seem that knowledge is freer than ever before. The internet, social media, and digital archives have transformed how we seek, share, and consume facts. Yet beneath this surface of openness lies a subtler, more insidious form of knowledge control, one that shapes what we see, what we believe, and what remains hidden. Unlike the overt censorship of the past book burnings, banned texts, or sealed archives, modern control operates through algorithms, content moderation, and the economics of attention. Search engines decide which results rise to the top. Social platforms prioritize some narratives while burying others. What once was controlled by gatekeepers in robes or political offices now resides in the code, written by unseen engineers, and the policies set by corporate executives. This new form of knowledge, gatekeeping, is often justified as necessary to combat misinformation, hate speech, or dangerous ideas. However, it also carries the risk of creating echo chambers, filtering bubbles, and the invisibilization of inconvenient or unpopular truths. The question is, who decides what knowledge is acceptable, and according to what standards? The sheer volume of information available can be overwhelming, making digital intermediaries the de facto arbiters of knowledge. But algorithms are not neutral. They reflect the values, biases, and interests of their creators and sponsors. When commercial priorities favor sensationalism or conformity, complex or controversial ideas struggle to break through. Furthermore, the global scale of digital knowledge means control is not confined to one culture or ideology. It is a multi-layered contest between governments, corporations, activists, and communities. In some cases, authoritarian regimes exploit digital tools to suppress dissent and rewrite history. Elsewhere, corporate monopolies limit diversity by prioritizing content that maximizes engagement and profit. This raises fundamental questions about agency and transparency. How much do users truly understand about the forces shaping their digital environment? Are we aware of what knowledge is algorithmically curated or omitted? And crucially, what happens to the inconvenient knowledge that challenges prevailing power structures in this new landscape? The tension mirrors age-old patterns. Knowledge has always been political, and those who control it wield enormous influence. The difference now is scale, speed, and invisibility. Digital knowledge control is diffuse, often unintentional, and yet deeply powerful. At the same time, the digital age offers remarkable opportunities. Whistleblowers, citizen historians, and alternative media use these platforms to bypass traditional gatekeepers and expose hidden truths. Online communities preserve endangered knowledge and foster critical dialogue across borders. Ultimately, the challenge lies in cultivating awareness and digital literacy, recognizing the layered dynamics at play. To truly democratize knowledge, societies must demand transparency from digital platforms, encourage diverse voices, and safeguard the freedom to question dominant narratives. As we reflect on the secret histories long buried and the forces that shaped their concealment, we must also confront how knowledge is controlled today, lest we recreate the same cycles of suppression in new, unseen forms. Beneath the blistering sun and silent winds of the Judean desert, countless secrets sleep in shadow. The very landscape seems to hold its breath, guarding mysteries that have evaded discovery for millennia. Beyond the known caves and scrolls, what lies buried in the shifting sands? What voices, what truths remain locked away, waiting patiently for a time when they might finally be heard? The Dead Sea Scrolls, fragments of an ancient world, opened a fragile window into a lost era. Yet they were but whispers from a far larger conversation. Many caves remain untouched or deliberately undisclosed, their contents shielded by layers of stone, sand, and time. Scholars debate the existence of additional scrolls, entire libraries, perhaps whole tomes of sacred knowledge hidden to protect fragile beliefs or powerful political orders. Imagine scrolls that rewrite not just history, but the foundation of faith itself, texts that challenge accepted dogma, revealing alternate visions of divinity, humanity, and destiny. What if some prophecies still lie sealed, warnings or wisdoms lost in the dust, waiting to be uncovered by the bold or the fortunate? The desert's silence conceals more than just ancient manuscripts. It may guard relics of forgotten civilizations, artifacts forged by hands long vanished, precious objects that hold clues to technology, culture, and spiritual insights far beyond what we imagine. Lost treasures, not of gold or jewels, but of knowledge, blueprints for understanding the cosmos, the nature of consciousness, or the very fabric of reality. The fear of these discoveries has driven centuries of suppression. Power has sought to control not only the present but the past, erasing evidence that might undermine authority. The desert, vast and desolate, serves as both refuge and tomb for these untold stories, a place where the sands of time bury inconvenient truths deep beneath the surface. And yet, nature is patient. Erosion, shifting winds, and geological forces will someday reveal what has been hidden. Archaeologists may unearth more than we dare to imagine, texts written in forgotten tongues, encoded messages, or scrolls that illuminate the lives and beliefs of those who came before. Will these secrets shake the foundations of history and faith? Or will they quietly enrich our understanding, adding depth to the tapestry of human experience? Perhaps some truths are meant to remain veiled, their revelation too disruptive or profound for any single generation in this desert. History's silence is both a curse and a promise. The unanswered questions linger, echoing across the barren valleys and rocky crags, beckoning those willing to listen. What still lies buried is a haunting reminder that history is never complete, that the past is a living puzzle with pieces yet to be found. As the sun dips below the horizon and twilight swallows the desert, the ancient sands keep their secrets close, but somewhere beneath, hidden from view, the story waits patiently for a chance to be told. History does not speak in thunderous declarations. It whispers, soft as the desert breeze, weaving its stories in shadows and silences between the stones. The great monuments crumble, the scrolls fade, and yet the silence endures weighty, profound, unyielding. It is the silence of what was lost, of what was hidden, of what was never told. In that silence lies both absence and presence. Absence of voices erased, chapters burned, knowledge buried beneath centuries of dust. Presence of mystery, waiting patiently like a dormant seed beneath the barren earth, ready to blossom when the time is ripe. It is a silence filled not with emptiness, but with possibility, sacred pause between what was and what may yet be. Revealed to listen to history's silence is to confront the limits of our knowing. It humbles us, reminding us that the past is not a fixed monument, but a living river shifting, flowing, carrying fragments that may surface in unexpected ways. The scrolls found near the Dead Sea were but droplets from this vast current, their discovery a rare glimpse beyond the veil. Yet even as they spoke, they left vast spaces unexplored, questions unanswered. This silence is not passive. It is an echo of power, ambition, and fear, a gatekeeper's watchful guard. It holds the stories that threaten comfort, that challenge the foundations upon which societies are built. It is the silence of 1,000 lost libraries, 1,000 burned manuscripts, and 1,000 censored truths. Yet it is also the silence that invites seekers, the restless souls who refuse to accept easy answers. Time itself moves in silence, erasing footsteps, yet revealing shadows. The desert winds carry ancient secrets across barren plains, and the stones keep their watchful vigil, unmoved by empires or ideologies. They remind us that knowledge is fragile, a flame flickering in the dark, requiring patience, courage, and reverence. History's silence is a mirror held to humanity's deepest contradictions, our hunger for truth, shadowed by our fear of disruption. It asks us, what do we choose to remember? What do we choose to forget? And who decides? As long as silence endures, history remains an unfinished story, its pages waiting for new scribes to write, to question, to discover. The greatest truths may lie not in the answers found, but in the courage to ask the questions that history's silence has long withheld. In this quiet space between certainty and mystery, we are reminded that the past is never truly gone. Lives in the ruins, in the forgotten scrolls, and in the unspoken stories beneath the desert sands. It waits patient, eternal, inviting us all to listen.